So perhaps you heard about the big political scandal that broke yesterday. This was major news, big deal. The media was going crazy over it. It was all that anybody was talking about on Twitter. There were calls for resignations and investigations. It was a big deal, right? Massively important story. At least that's what I have been assured repeatedly and loudly over the course of the past 24 hours. The scandal, get ready for this if you haven't heard yet. The scandal is that Ted Cruz went on vacation with his family. I'll pause right here and let you collect yourself for a moment, because I know it takes a minute to recover from hearing something as shocking as this. Yes, Ted Cruz went on vacation. I'll say it again so that the severity of this situation can sink in. I repeat, Ted Cruz went on vacation. Why does this matter? Why is it important? Why should it garner all the headlines and so much controversy? Well, you'll have to ask somebody else, frankly, because I don't see it. But it does matter. That's what I'm told. It matters a lot. You should care. You must care. Now let's back up and let's try to figure out why we should care so much about this. We'll back up for a minute. As the story goes, Ted Cruz was spotted at the airport Thursday morning with his family boarding a plane for Cancun. This is scandalous, supposedly, because Texas is in the midst of a crisis with millions of its citizens without power and stranded because of the winter storms. As the scandal broke and Texas Democrats called for his resignation about it, and every media outlet turned the whole thing into Pearl Harbor, Cruz announced that he would be returning immediately from Cancun and that he was only going there to escort his family, implying that he always planned to bring them and then turn around and fly back and come back home. He later admitted, though, that he actually cut his trip short, that he was planning to go for the week or however long, and he decided to turn around and come back. That night, the New York Times had an exclusive report featuring private text messages between Cruz's wife, Heidi, and her friends. And they published these private text messages. Here's the Times. Here's what they reported. Like millions of his constituents across Texas, Senator Ted Cruz had a frigid home without electricity this week amid the state's power crisis. But unlike most, Mr. Cruz got out, fleeing Houston and hopping a Wednesday afternoon flight to Cancun with his family for a respite at a luxury resort. Photos of Mr. Cruz and his wife Heidi boarding the flight ricocheted quickly across social media and left both his political allies and rivals aghast at a tropical trip as a disaster unfolded at home. The blowback only intensified after Mr. Cruz, a Republican, released a statement saying that he had flown to Mexico, quote, to be a good dad and accompany his daughters and their friends. He noted he was flying back Thursday afternoon, though he did not disclose how long he had originally intended to stay. Text messages sent from Ms. Cruz to friends and Houston neighbors on Wednesday revealed a hastily planned trip. Their house was, quote, freezing, as Ms. Cruz put it, and she proposed a getaway until Sunday. Ms. Cruz invited others to join them at the Ritz-Carlton in Cancun, where they had stayed, quote, many times, noting the room price this week, $300 a night, and its good security. The text messages were provided to the New York Times and confirmed by a second person on the thread who declined to be identified because of the private nature of the texts. Okay. So that gets us up to speed on the controversy. Now, a few things here. Number one, this is not a scandal. Okay. There's no actual reason why Ted Cruz should stay in Texas. He's not going to be pulling out his toolbox and going to fix the power grid himself. Is it a good look to leave? Is it good optics? No, obviously not. It was a political blunder, a political mistake. But that's another way of saying that there's nothing actually wrong with taking his family to a warm place. It only looks wrong. It's not actually wrong. It just looks bad. So if you want to slam him for doing something that looks bad, if you want to hit him for being politically careless, then fine. But if you pretend that there's some deeper scandal here, some actually corrupt behavior involved in this guy taking a vacation to Cancun, then you're being absurd. You're being ridiculous. In fact, to hit him on the optics is to admit. That's the point about optics. If we say that something is bad optics from a politician, what we're saying is, it's not actually bad, it just looks bad, but we know it's not actually bad. Well, if you know that it's not actually bad, then stop acting as though you think it is. That said, he obviously was not planning to fly with his family down to Cancun and then turn around and come back, as he seemed to imply initially. So he shouldn't have implied that. So he's handled this badly. There's no question about it. Still, it's not a major scandal or a scandal at all. It's a gaffe. Okay, there's a difference between a gaffe and a scandal. A gaffe is when a politician does something that looks really stupid and bad, but there's no corruption, no crime, no real unethical behavior taking place. So it's a gaffe. Number two, given that this is not a real scandal, publishing private text messages with Cruz's wife and her friends is scummy behavior. Almost as scummy as whatever quote-unquote friend sent the text to the media in the first place. Imagine what a scumbag you have to be to do that. You've got your neighbor inviting you on a trip, and what do? You immediately contact the New York Times to throw her husband under the bus? Now, there may be a scenario where it would be ethical for the media to publish text messages between a politician's wife and her friends. There may be a situation where that would be ethical. If there is, this is not that situation. A trip to Cancun is not that situation. Maybe if there was criminal behavior taking place and you had text messages that proved it, then okay, that might be a reason to publish them. This is not criminal behavior or anything close to it. So there's no excuse to publish text messages. Number three, people on social media, especially on the left, have been drawing comparisons between this and the Democrats like Newsom, who went to restaurants or hairdressers during the lockdowns. And many were claiming that this thing with Cruz is in fact worse somehow than the stuff with Nancy Pelosi at the hairdresser or Newsom at the restaurant or the mayor of Chicago going to the hairdresser, saying that at least it's on par, if not worse, the Cruz thing. That's the claim, which is utterly ridiculous. The outrage over Newsom and others, it wasn't that they were off having a good time during the pandemic. That's not the problem. Okay? Nobody cares if they have a good time. I don't care if they have a good time or not. That makes no difference to me. The scandal was that they were doing what they had forbidden the citizens of their state from doing. They were breaking their own rules and laws and policies. They were passing rules saying, you guys cannot do this, and if you do it, we'll fine you or arrest you. And then they turned around and did that thing. That's the scandal. And that's a real scandal. That's real corruption. That's abuse of power. So that's the difference. So there you have a scandal as opposed to a gaffe from Cruz. From Cruz, at best, bad optics, not an abuse of power. It's not Cruz violating laws that he helped to pass or any other law. He's not violating any law or rule at all, in fact. To equate these two things is obviously misleading in the extreme. Number four, most importantly, however you feel about Cancun Gate, you should understand why the media was focusing so intently on this. You can argue that it was a bad thing for Cruz to do, a stupid thing, but you cannot reasonably or credibly argue that it deserves all the headlines and the attention that it got. So why did it get that attention? Well, I submit that probably had something to do with this. The Times-Union, the paper in Albany, several hours before the big Cruz news broke, had this report, quote, the FBI and the U.S. Attorney's Office in Brooklyn have launched an investigation that is examining, at least in part, the actions of Governor Andrew Cuomo's coronavirus task force in its handling of nursing homes and other long-term care facilities during the pandemic. The probe by the U.S. Attorney's Office in the Eastern District of New York is apparently in its early stages and is focusing on the work of some of the senior members of the governor's task force, according to a person with direct knowledge of the matter who is not authorized to speak publicly. Okay, so there is an FBI investigation. There's a lot more to this report, by the way. You can go to the Times-Union and read about it. There's an FBI investigation into Andrew Cuomo, the governor of New York, who was hailed as the COVID hero. Now he's being investigated by the FBI for a scandal, an actual scandal that led to the deaths of thousands of people. Right as news of this investigation was beginning to spread, suddenly the major story is Ted Cruz going to Cancun. I don't think this is a coincidence. Now, you could argue that even without this story from Cuomo, the media would still be making hay with the Cruz, quote-unquote, scandal because it's a Republican and it's their opportunity to embarrass a Republican. And that's probably true, too. I think all of these things are related. What we do know, though, is that the Cruz story does not deserve the attention that it got. And yet, you go on social media and you find even conservatives who are joining in the outrage bandwagon, willfully being manipulated by the media. The media wants you to see this as a much bigger deal than it is. They want you to see, they are telling you to see it as on par with Newsom. They want you to focus on this instead of the Cuomo thing. And even now, so many conservatives are happy to go along. Even now, are happy to say, well, okay, if you tell me this is what I should care about. It's absolutely absurd. And by the way, just to reinforce what I said at the very top here. Ted Cruz is not going to be going and fixing the power grid. Now, maybe what you want him to do is to do the photo ops and to go out and to hand out cups of soup or whatever. And that's what a lot of politicians, in fact, do in these circumstances. Why do they do that? If there's some sort of natural disaster and the politicians are there themselves personally, handing out the soups and waving to the cameras, why are they doing that? Is it because they care about their citizens? No, it's because it's a political opportunity. They don't act, nobody needs them. In fact, it's better for them not to be there. Because when they're there, then there's media, there's security. It's actually better logistically to not have them. They can delegate that. I'm not saying that a senator should be doing nothing in response to a crisis like this in his state, but he can delegate it. He can get on the phone privately, make phone calls, send people out to do things. He doesn't need to personally be there himself. And in fact, it's probably better, all things concerned, if he's not. The reason why the politicians themselves personally want to be there is for the photo op. I don't understand why. I understand why the politician wants to do that. Why do citizens want that from their politicians? Why do you want a politician to do the photo op? I don't need that. Personally, it's not something that I need to see. And I'd prefer if we didn't see it. Now, if there's evidence that Ted Cruz, even behind the scenes, is doing nothing whatsoever, hasn't delegated anything, hasn't made any phone calls, hasn't sent any of his people out to go hand out the soup and to go to the warming stations, if there's evidence that he's done absolutely nothing behind the scenes, then fine, you can get him on that. But I don't see any reason to assume that. All we know is that he was not originally going to be going himself for the photo op. Now he is going to go for the photo op, and I guess a lot of people feel more comfortable, and they feel comfortable now. Oh, thank God, we've got the politician doing the photo op. I don't get it. Being manipulated by the media. Let's all try to be better than that. Listen, hit that subscribe button right now. Do it right now. I thank you for your compliance. It is somewhat appreciated.